Hi, I'm Scott Wynn. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to make a Japanese style plane. I first started using Japanese planes in the 1970s after searching for quality tools, which the Western tools of that time, I think it hit kind of a low point, Western woodworking tools. And since that time I've found these tools have been an extremely versatile tool, outperforming, well, in most tasks, outperforming all planes. You can get them in a variety of sizes. You can make them and modify them easily, which is one of the most important things to me. And the most important thing is the blades. The blades are exceptional. You cannot get blades of this quality on, okay, you can challenge me on this, but on any other plane. Its versatility attracts me. I've made most of these I have bought, but I have made a number of these. These two matching side rabbet, skew bladed. This is a compass plane. This is a spoon bottom plane. This is another compass plane. I made these. These other ones I've purchased. These are excellent for touching up carving or shaping carving, for doing classical furniture curves, coming in and touching up and getting into areas, for doing avant-garde work and experimenting with new shapes. Avoid sandpaper, avoid scraping a lot of times. And you can make these pretty fast. Certainly use them the same day. The slow down in work is kind of minimal. Here's a molding plane I made for a specific project. Here's a chamfer plane. This one I did buy. That's a very handy plane. This one I made. Intermediate size. These are two spoon bottom planes. This one I bought. This one I modified. No, I take that back. I made this one. These are some compass planes. Most of these two have been modified from straight block planes. The curves on some of these have been altered. These were bought as compass planes. If you come up, you need a new curve. You can either alter one or make a new one. You're not dealing with cast iron. You're not dealing with intense blocks of wood that you might find in some styles, and awkward proportions. These rectangular shapes lend themselves to modification. And of course you can make the biggest smoothing planes available. 2 3/4, 3-inch wide blades. They'll give you a near perfect flat surface and very little overlap, very little scalloping of the blade when you're doing the finishing. So let's get started on that. There's a few things we have to go over. There's some differences in the Japanese plane from what you may know from other planes, and we'll go over that next. One of the things I like most, besides the blade quality, is the versatility of the Japanese plane. Large and small, and they're also easily reshaped for specific uses. This is a plane I bought. You can still see the label there. This is a flat bottom plane originally. I put a curve on the sole and made it into a compass plane. And over time, as projects demanded, I made up compass planes to match the work I was doing. So I have, right now I got 5 of them in this size, of varying curvatures, which span quite a lot actually. A variety of circumferences. This is the flattest one I have, and this is the one with the greatest curvature. These two I modified from flat bottom planes, and these 3 I bought. It's interesting, in some of these are actually not top quality, but the blade still is superior to anything I could get in a plane of this type. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but this cross pin that holds the chip breaker is a nail, because I've had this out. And I'm not sure it's been drilled all the way across, but if you look at that, it's not quite perpendicular. I think the hole was drilled and it was finished off by driving it across until it embedded itself on the other side, and then you can see where pliers have cut it off. Very straightforward, you know, really down to earth, functional approach to that. Also, the technique of making Japanese plane is very handy for making finger planes. Chibi Kanna, they're sometimes called in Japanese. Excuse my accent. We're talking about compass planes. This is actually a compass plane. There's a very slight curve along there. Here is a more pronounced curve, needless to say. These I made. Here we have a spoon bottom. It's curved in 2 directions. There we have a skew-bladed rabbet plane at a high angle. I forget what it is. The angle is exactly. But I used it, I had some troublesome mahogany that I had to get into the corner. And these are actually spoon, not spoon bottom, but curved on the bottom, compass planes. The larger version here. I just used this one recently. This plane I bought, you can buy these as well. I open it up here because I use this to texture the interiors of salad bowls. It leaves a nice texture. Larger spoon bottom plane, this one I made. You can tell my initial fitting was pretty sloppy. It's been backed up several times with different layers of paper. But I use this for scooping out, or finishing actually, chair seats. It's also why it's so rounded, because very active and a very tight grip on that. This is the first plane I made, actually. It's an excellent blade, and I discovered that you don't necessarily need a chip breaker. When this blade is sharp, it will cut figured wood quite confidently. Also, you can make molding planes. This is for a specific project. And this is a little plane for planing to a specific thickness, like you might use in shoji lattice, kamiko. Well, you're not limited either to the small planes, the little finger planes. You can also make some of the widest finishing planes available, 75 millimeter. This one I made to 43 degrees. This one I made to 47.5 degrees. I use this for finishing cherry mainly, and other woods of the similar hardness. This one I use for preparation work, to remove snipe, for instance, before I use the finished plane. Its length and width gives a really flat surface, providing a good beginning for the finely set smoothing planes. Today, however, these, I don't suggest you start out with blades of this size, planes of this size. The difficulty and the amount of work escalates geometrically. I find that this 48 millimeter, 50 or 55 millimeter, 36 millimeter, in that range is a good range to start. It's a little bit wider than the Stanley block planes, very comfortable in the hands. It works so smaller woods and in surfaces of bigger woods as well, quite efficiently. It's quite nice. So I already have this one, but I cut it out of some white oak, American white oak, And as you can see, the porosity of the wood here, the plane functions quite well, but I think I'll take this opportunity to recut this die, which is a Japanese term for the block, because I've come across a piece of Japanese oak, and this will be a great opportunity to recut this. Let's talk about the blade itself. One of the most distinctive features of the blade is this taper, narrower here and wider here, and that is the mechanism that provides all the locking and adjustment. The matching slots here and the bed are custom fit to this taper, and as the blade approaches its working position, it's wedged in there securely and won't move when it's actually doing the work. The other thing that many people don't know is that the back of this blade is curved. I don't know if you can see that. It's not flat, and that is on purpose. Some discussion as to the purpose of that. You can see there it's even greater. I believe you've got a convex surface that runs in this. This helps keep the blade from shifting. I think that's just a little nuance there. If the blade was dead flat, there'd be less resistance to the blade shifting its lateral position. So when you're making a plane, you have to know that, because you have to accommodate that curve that's in there. The curve runs this way. It's hollowed in here. And of course, we're all familiar with the hollow here. This is done to facilitate flattening of the back, which must be dead flat. Also, frequently, this one doesn't look like it tapers much, if at all, but oftentimes, no, this one is parallel, but oftentimes the blades will be slightly tapered going this way. This facilitates lateral adjustment, but as you can see by this blade, it's certainly not necessary. There's usually enough play in these side slots, which you make sure there is enough play for the lateral adjustment. This has been a very good working blade. It doesn't have the chased signature or name on it. This has been stamped, but still quite good workday plane. Now this is the chip breaker. This was actually purchased separately, though I see it has the same name on it. So oftentimes I've had to purchase these separately. It looks like this came as a set. This one has been hollow ground on the back, much like the blade. So you flatten that using the same technique that you use here. And this whole area is hollowed out. Again, and this blade, this chip breaker is laminated, and I talked about the heat and stress and impact that the chip breaker takes. The best chip breakers you will get from the Japanese will be inlaid with the harder blade steel to accommodate and reduce the wear you get from the impact. And you can see here the vaporized oils on the chip breaker from it doing its work. And here we have the ears. Now this is what you use to adjust the fit to the blade when the chip breaker is set underneath this pin. So the blade, you don't need the chip breaker for this blade to work. You can use the plane just like that. So basically you could have quite a functional plane with only two pieces, the block and the blade. In the late 1800s, they introduced chip breakers to Japanese planes, and they've been using them since. But still to this day, a craftsman will pride himself in his ability to get fine and tear out free shavings from a single-bladed plane. The chip breaker just makes the kind of day-to-day smoothing of the work go a little bit faster because it's a little more dependable and not quite so dependent on the sharpness and quality of the blade. So the chip breaker fits in like that and is held in place by the pin. So the ears, these little things here, that's how you adjust that fit. This pin may not be parallel to the face of the blade. This is handmade, so there might be some difference in thickness. The cut, the setting of the blade when you cut the die for the blade may be off slightly. So the adjustment is done with these ears. And it sounds like, do we need to adjust this one by now? Yeah. So you put one finger on there and tap that, both corners. And when it makes the sound is not contacting this. And you adjust that. By using some sort of anvil. And well, in this case we're bending this ear. And bend that over a little bit. Still needs work. You can see right there where the cross pin was bearing a little bit more on this side. It probably is the reason why it was functioning as well as it was, despite the fact that this ear was a little high. Still a whisker. So now if it was low, okay, should be good. If it was low, you span that between that point and there and hit the high point, and that'll flatten it out a little bit. So these are things you need to know to use the Japanese plane and to set it up. It's slightly different on these little finger planes. These blades, now you can buy individual blades, and unless you can find a source on the internet, it's probably how you're going to have to buy your blades. There is available a blank that you use to cut blades of different widths. Now this blank, I've cut a couple blades off of this, was originally almost 4 inches across. And this is tapered. It's not hollow ground like that, but there's a slight hollow ground in it from here to here, and overall it's tapered from here down to this width. There is a piece of hard edge steel laminated, and that's what you see right there. So in order to make a blade, you know, you can mark your width on there. You cut the soft backing steel with a hacksaw until you hit that hard steel, and you will know when you hit that hard steel because it's so hard the hacksaw just stops and will refuse to cut any further. But at that point you can almost break that with your fingers because this hard steel is so brittle. But you do put it in a vise, tap it to snap it free, and then grind these rough edges away. And that's what you have in this blade. So you can see this portion here is nicely polished to an edge. We don't have the hollow that goes around like this, it's just along the edge. The blade overall is tapered, and you cut the escapement for that to match, and that's how you make these little finger planes. And you know, you can grind them to your different shapes. These are ground at angle. So that's something that's very versatile. Sometimes you might need to make 2 or 3 specialty little finger planes to reach in or make a specific curve or to smooth something out. If you've got a blank like this, you can make a variety of planes pretty quickly. This plane of this size, you can cut and fit this blade in less than an hour. You don't have to wait overnight for the glue to dry. You can go back to work. If you're having trouble following this or memorizing it, it's all in my book here, Discovering Japanese Hand Planes. So it's all written down. It's illustrated. Instructions on how to make Japanese hand planes. Here we have the little Chibikani blades, the blade blank, and the technique for making them and for cutting that blank into different blade widths, and so forth. Compass planes, spoon bottom planes, hollows and rounds. Let's talk about the die or the block. These are 2 Japanese oak dies. They've had a little accident with some vinegar iron stain, but we won't talk about that. It doesn't affect the usability or anything. White oak, red oak, though there is some discussion in one source as to whether or not this is actually a cherry. But that, I've only seen that in one source. I believe these are oak. These are denser than virtually any North American hardwood. Density may be similar to lignum vitae, but easily cut. They have all the right properties, and this is what you're looking for. So it is a little bit difficult to replace these woods. It can be done, and you can have quite an effective plane. It's nice to have these because they have all the qualities that you're looking for, and that is hardness, density, but it also has to grip the blade, and despite being very hard, it has to have a little resilience, a little give, so that it can grab the blade and the blade not shift. This is why maple, for instance, it's hard, it's heavy. It doesn't grip the wood, however. The blade will want to shift, and in fact it's perhaps a little too hard, not having enough give to grab hold of the blade. I think this exacerbates its issue with not wanting to grip the blade to begin with. American oak, I have a very heavy hard piece of American white oak that I cut this plane out of, the one that we're going to replace, and you can see what happens here. Despite its density and its ability to grip and its resiliency, there's resistance to splitting and cracking, which is another quality that you want. The grain texture is not dense enough, and we have this. Now this doesn't really affect the working of the plane as far as I can tell, and if I didn't have the opportunity to recut this block, I probably would continue to use this. But you can see here that and you can see the density and the hardness in the end grain, that it doesn't work as effectively as the Japanese oaks. I've used Indian rosewood. I think the rosewoods actually work pretty well. The Chinese use rosewood for their planes. Surprisingly, though sometimes the darker woods can mark the lighter woods, and sometimes some of them are a little too brittle. They don't have enough resiliency to be able to set the the blade and resist cracking as well. I made this one. I've made 2 planes out of canary wood. Surprisingly, that worked quite well. Its only problem was this one I originally made in cherry and dropped it, and the block split. So it doesn't seem to have a great deal of resistance to splitting, but other than that, it has all the other properties. Angico is a possibility. It's a wood you won't find all the time, but it's pretty successful. I've made blocks out of cherry, a little too soft, even to dense. I think pear, a little harder. Some European planes are made from pear. It's a possibility. Apple might be a possibility as well. So that's some of your choices. You may have to experiment. A lot of times for the little planes, the finger planes, I have leftovers from other blocks or from failed planes, and I save those little cut-offs and I use them to make the small planes. So here we have 2 old planes. I don't think they're extremely old. I'm guessing some place between the late 60s and mid 80s. And I got these from a importer that imported a lot of things, a lot of housewares. These 2 might have actually been the house carpenters. I'm not sure they're ever for sale, and they show wear. This is the blade that came with that one. It looks like a fairly decent blade. However, the chip breaker is not well set up, or I'm not sure of the quality, and the edge isn't actually usable, so the chip breaker was never really used on this plane. This is the blade that came with this one, and you can see here some time has been spent setting this one up. Pretty nice blade, chip breaker, good quality. But as regards the block, what I wanted to point out is that these are in storage, and I'm not sure how long. It could have been 20 years, perhaps longer. They were in the back storerooms of the store. Plane, first get a Japanese plane, and if you have to store it for a long time, remove the blade right away. It's coming from Japan, high humidity. It's been in a shipping container, high humidity. It's coming to the States. If you're in California, low humidity. It's going to seize the blade so tightly you're going to have trouble getting it out. Worst case scenario, it's going to split. Here you can see the splits that are caused by the wood shrinking around the blade. You can see that, and it goes all the way down. The blade was pinched between these 2. If you turn it over, you can see again, split here, split going right there. And I think there's a couple more here. Yeah, right there. And it'll start to split there and there as well. This is some other damage. I'm not sure what that is. And we've got a split going here, and this is a drying split. Let's suggest that the die is not the top quality. It's twisted and it's cupped. Bark side's always down. This is cupped, so the whole piece is cupped like that. Similar on this one. It's cracked all the way down there. It's cracked there. It's cracked here, down there. See the crack? Really? There, there, and there. Okay, despite that, this die is not that usable, so despite that, I'm going to cut this down and see if I can't get, it's going to be a little shorter. Luckily we have some thickness to take off, and this will increase the length a little bit. And see if I can get a decent piece of wood out of here. It should be stabilized. It's been around the shop now for half a year. Always let your planes set for at least a half a year before you set them up. I know you want to get to use them, but you can set them up sooner. You're just going to have more maintenance along the way, and hopefully nothing catastrophic, or at least really time consuming happens because you set it up too soon.